Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here, and welcome back to the next part in the Sword and Sorcery Saga, a series where we are looking at, reviewing, reading, discussing some great works of sword and sorcery fiction. And today we are going to take a look specifically at Warrior Witch of Hell, and that is written by Asa Drake. And Asa Drake is a pen name for an author called C. Dean Andersson. And this particular volume of Warrior Witch of Hell was written or published in 1985 by Questar Fantasy, and it is part of a trilogy. And the books that comprise the core trilogy are Warrior Witch of Hell, Death Riders of Hell, and Werebeasts of Hell. Now, this series has recently, somewhat recently, been republished under slightly different titles under the author's original name, which is C. Dean Andersson, and it is called the Bloodsong Trilogy. You can get the Bloodsong Hell times 3 Omnibus Collection digitally on your Kindle or other ebook device. But Warrior Witch of Hell is the book that I have read and the book that we're going to focus on today. And I have not read the other two books in the trilogy yet, which is Death Riders of Hell and Werebeasts of Hell. But rest assured, I am going to, because Warrior Witch of Hell is absolutely awesome. This is the kind of book I want to read when I am reading, just kind of spog standard sword and sorcery fiction. It is metal as F. Every chapter in this book contains at least one image that could be a heavy metal album cover. It is full of action and traps and monsters and sorcery and questing. Just a really great book that is actually surprisingly well written. It does contain some problems and some of the issues we will talk about, but overall I immensely enjoyed the hell out of Warrior Witch of Hell. Let's first talk about the covers a little bit. So all three of these original covers were of course done by Boris Vallejo, one of the big names in fantasy art. And while I do think the images themselves are pretty fantastic, they are kind of do a pretty poor they are a poor representation of the actual characters in the book. Boris Vallejo and his wife Julie Bell, of course, known for their very kind of sexual and sexualized art and their depiction of the ultimate human form. I love their work a lot. But the main character is named Bloodsong, and nowhere in the book does she ever wear anything close to what you are seeing here. She is never once sexualized at all in the book. I don't think her appearance is ever even mentioned, except for the fact that she is clad from head to toe in black. She is like a Black Death rider on this skeletal horse, this hell horse. So even the horse is kind of wrong here. But this image is taken somewhat from a depiction in the book, but just a really poor representation. I would imagine that this outfit here is probably closer to what she was wearing, but even that, she should have like a black hood on. And the depictions of her, the only depictions of Bloodsong, the main character in the novel, often has her with this ghostly mask of a skeleton, like kind of superimposed over her face, which that could have been a really awesome image in and of itself. But of course, it's Vallejo, so you got to have some sexy women there. But that's just a little bit about the art, and the art is super important. The art is what attracted me to these books, of course. I mean, these just look like any kind of power metal album cover you could think of. But let's talk about Warrior Witch of Hell. Let's read a little bit here. Bloodsong and freedom. That is a battle cry that the main characters often call out. And it says that the evil wizard Nidhugg rules, but a cry of rebellion is still remembered. The cry of Bloodsong, the woman warrior who once fought her way to freedom. Here is the dream of thousands doomed to slavery and unspeakable torture in the deathless lord's terrible fortress. Now her cry is heard again, as Bloodsong returns, riding a hell horse from the grim halls of death itself. She wields such magic as few mortals possess. On her hand is the skull ring of the death goddess Hel. At her side are a few good friends, faithful and daring, companions willing to follow Bloodsong into the very bowels of the evil stronghold, capture the powerful war skull of Hel, and destroy Nidhugg's might forever. So this book, if you wanted to think of something, maybe you're not familiar with the book, the author, it could very easily, with a couple gender swaps and name changes, be written as a He-Man novel. It's that kind of sword and sorcery. The villain Nidhugg is very much like Skeletor. He's a mustache twirling ne'er-do-well, and he's kind of, even though he has lots of power, he's also kind of bumbling in that he never really musters up enough of a force to stop the heroes. And that is one of my issues with the book, is the heroes overcome their challenges way too easily. And they're not even really depicted as Mary Sue's. They do make interesting choices, but the power level of the sorcerer, of the evil sorcerer Nidhugg, never seems to match Bloodsong and her heroes. Of course, Bloodsong is working as an agent of Hel, so she has a goddess's power behind her. But I still would have liked to have seen the heroes struggle a little bit more. There is one sub-story where a hero struggles, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what you have here is you have a story of Bloodsong. Her original name was Freyatis. This is based on kind of a Norse mythology. And Freyatis, she was killed by this evil sorcerer. So was her husband, and her daughter was kidnapped. And she goes to Hel, where she pledges allegiance to Hel, the goddess of death. Hel kind of renames her as Bloodsong, sends her back to the world of the living with this Hel ring, and Hel has etched on Bloodsong's mind the spells and the powerful incantations that she will need to defeat Nidhugg. Where once she was a warrior who completely turned her nose up and turned her back on the power of magic, now she is a magic and sword wielding Hel warrior who can summon a skeletal horse, who can shoot a fire beam out of her ring. She can summon wind demons. She is a very powerful character, not unlike Elric, who summons the power of chaos. And she is on a quest for Hel to defeat Nidhugg, the evil sorcerer, who uses the power of the War Skull and who dwells underneath the castle of Nostrand in the Cavern of the War Skull. And the War Skull is this totem, this massive stone skull that has to be recharged by human sacrifice. And so Nidhugg keeps a huge supply of slaves in which he straps to his cavern walls and kills them, drains their energy, turning them into raisin-like corpses, and drains their energy into the War Skull, where he uses the power of the War Skull to stay young and powerful. And so that is kind of the two opposing forces. And the use of sorcery and the sword of the sword and sorcery genre is it's definitely a focus in this book, because you do have Bloodsong and her not wanting to originally use magic, but she's forced to become powerful enough to overthrow the evil sorcerer. And on her quest to the castle, she meets a party of characters, and they form a party. And so you have a young witch named Huld, and she works for the goddess Freya. And Huld is a healer. She's young. She helps the party by healing them. She has a spell of night vision, so she can help them get through dark and clouded areas. And then along the way, Bloodsong is also joined by two of her older friends, a couple named Thorfinn, who is a human kind of barbarian, a Viking probably, and Velgarth, his companion, his wife, his partner. and she's really good with a bow. And Thorfinn and Velgarth, they knew Bloodsong way back in the day, before Bloodsong became Bloodsong, when she was Freydis, and they knew her and her husband and their daughter, and they join her on her quest to kill the evil sorcerer. And what's interesting is Velgarth has this somewhat troubled relationship with Bloodsong now, because she sees in her the power of hell, and Velgarth is still very much anti-magic, and she has to struggle with her relationship with this new entity named Bloodsong, balancing her old friendship with Freydis with her new relationship with the entity called Bloodsong. And that's ends up being a pretty interesting part of the book. The camaraderie, the banter between the party is really good. With Hold, the young witch, she kind of lies about her expertise, and that gets her into some trouble. Bloodsong gives her a lot of grief over that, and kind of jabs at her, and like, hey, if you're such a powerful witch, how come you couldn't see this coming? And that's really cool. And then Thorfinn and Velgarth, they're a great couple, a power couple, and I really like them in the book a lot. Now, I did say that the characters mostly overcome their situations, their troubles with ease, but there's one character in the book, and I forgot to write down the name, so I'm just gonna have to find it real quick. And she is a slave that Nordhug uses, and her name is Jalal, I think her name is. Jalna. So Jalna is a slave that Nidhugg uses to get to Bloodsong. He possesses her. He uses her power to teleport his psyche all over the world, or all over the land, so he can track Bloodsong. And he is constantly using her in very brutal ways. She gets tortured. She like almost literally goes through hell and back. And she is really put through the ringer, and she comes out victorious, mostly. And I really liked her character's plight. Her character's dramatic arc was really good, and that was one of the most interesting things about the book. And there is a really cool twist with Nidhugg sends her down into this pit of these slave demons that he has underneath his cave of the War Skull, and he sends her down there to be brutalized by these walking corpses. But there's a really cool twist where things don't turn out quite as Nidhugg had planned. Now, there is a lot of nudity in the book, but it's never depicted in a way that is like overly sexualized or used to tantalize. It is mainly used to show how Nidhugg treats his slaves. He forces his slaves to be naked all the time. He actually forces them to fight naked in an arena and to humiliate them. And there's a really cool part where, a long time ago, Freydis, Bloodsong, and Velgarth were slaves of Nidhugg, and they had to fight naked in this arena. And at one point, Velgarth and Thorfinn are on the run from these soldiers, and one of the soldiers recognizes Velgarth's face, and she actually comments that he must have been the only soldier in watching the battle in the arena who was focusing on her face. And I thought that was a really cool little detail. And the women characters, I think you have three really strong female leads in the core party. They are they're pretty well written. They do interesting things. They make interesting choices. You have Jalna, who is being held captive, and even though she is pretty much naked throughout the entire book, she also fights back very aggressively against Nidhugg and uses her mind and her powers to overcome the hell that she is put through. So just a fantastic book. It's full of just zombies and monsters and magic. Great sword fights, lots of blood, lots of a great central quest, something that you can read quickly. It's exciting. I had a smile on my face the entire time I was reading it. It's barely over 200 pages, and I recommend this book as much as I could recommend a book of sword and sorcery, I cannot wait to read parts 2 and 3, Death Riders of Hell and Werebeasts of Hell. If they are half as good as Warrior Witch of Hell, then this is going to be one of my favorite fantasy trilogies. It is pretty well written too. I was surprised at how well written it is. Let's just read a little bit here. This is from the prologue. In the center of a vast torchlit cavern, a dying witch hung naked in spell chains upon a monstrous skull. The towering skull pulsed with purple light, throbbing with a deep, rumbling moan. In spite of the cavern's icy air, the young woman's skin glistened with the sweat of pain and fear, her long blonde hair clinging wetly to her bare flesh. Through eyes half closed with pain and exhaustion, she gazed down at the tall man in gold-trimmed purple robes standing below her on the cavern floor, his face concealed beneath a black silk hood, while black leather gloves covered his hands. A stench of death emanated from him, wafting up to her through the frigid air. He was Nidhugg, sorcerer, warrior king, and traitor to the death goddess Hel. So yeah, that's a nice prologue. It gets you right into like what is going on in this book really well, and the writing stays consistent throughout. It's not overly purple, it's not tons of exclamation points and $10 words, but it's also not just simply written in like kind of a juvenile way. I think the writing is actually pretty dang good. So yeah, Warrior Witch of Hell, the Blood Song Trilogy by Asa Drake. Highly recommended, and we will definitely be discussing the other 2 books when I finish them. So all right guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this, and we will talk to you later. Bye bye.